sort of cognitive science point of view, where do brands actually live? And a couple of people have mentioned this, but it's, I think, something that hasn't been said enough. Brands, at the end of the day, are concepts. They're concepts that are made up of mental representations, brand features, whatever you want to call them, brand attributes, brand features, are actual mental representations. They're bits of knowledge in people's minds, in people's brains that are part of encyclopedic knowledge. And an interesting experiment that highlights that, is the person from Coke still here from yesterday? No, he left. It's too bad. He would have liked to see that. A brand concept is clearly evidenced in the brain through priming studies. So many of you have probably heard of this experiment that was done when people were hooked to an fMRI machine where you do magnetic resonance imaging of the brain, and were shown a can of Coke, and all sorts of little areas, as you can see in the slide there, were activated. So you can see that the brand Coke actually has some resonance, if you will, in someone's brain. They did the same thing with Pepsi, and there was no effect. Okay, so quite interesting. That's why I thought that the Coke guy would like this. So there is definitely, with some brands, some evidence of activation in the brain. So we can really talk about the fact that there's a sort of physical, sort of manifestation of the brand in people's brain. So just like other concepts, so brands, I've said, are concepts. Just like other concepts, brands help us to communicate. Okay. So as we, wear certain brands or talk about certain brands, this allows us to tell other people who we are, what we look like, what we'd like to do, and so on and so forth. So these brand features that I talked about that are, mental representations can be things like a Starbucks, cup of coffee. For a lot of people, particularly here in Europe, quality coffee, but it also means American. Take a break, on the go, in the know, dependable, customizable, and so on and so forth. A Fiat 500, the new Fiat 500, we probably have brand features such as Italian, not Japanese, it's not a Toyota, great design, hip, fun, elegant, colorful, and so on and so forth. And then the Gap red, conviction, do the right thing, citizen of the world, Bono, visible, AIDS aware, and so on and so forth. So these are brand features that we have in our minds, and that we then are going to, sort of communicate through our consumption, either in terms of actually talking to people and telling them about these brand features. Hey, I think the Fiat 500 is pretty hip, and you can choose a lot of colors. Or simply by wearing the brand or by using it in a way that other people are going to see. So when we talk about communication of these brand features, it's not just a question of actually talking and sort of intentionally communicating, but it's also how we display the brand. And so at the same time as these brands sort of are communicated or consumed, they go from the sort of mental space into the public space, and they change from mental representations into public representations. And that is part of this process that is then going to lead towards more relevance. And these, at the same time as the brand is communicated or consumed, another person will sort of, grasp these brand features and will turn them into mental representations again. So we have this effect, this chain effect, from a mental representation in my mind to a public representation, which is the words that I am uttering, to the mental representations that you are forming in your minds right now as you're listening to me. Okay, and then some of you are tweeting and probably saying Marie Taillard is saying this or that, and that turns it into another public representation, and so on and so forth. So this chain effect is what we argue builds relevance. Remember, I told you anthropologists tell us that relevance builds up as messages are transmitted. So communication and cognition build up relevance every step of the way. And what I'm arguing is at the same time we're building up brand value. So it's brand value that is being built at the same time as we are building relevance for the brand. So the message here is that consumers craft a more relevant brand based on more authenticity and credibility and ultimately on more relevance. And this work that's done by consumers as they use the brand and as they communicate the brand is quite important. You know your brand is relevant when consumers interact spontaneously among themselves and with the brand. Okay, so when these communities form and people start interacting around the brand, using their passion for the brand. When the meaning of the brand evolves or shifts. There was a very interesting example given by someone yesterday of how sometimes the meaning of a brand will change enough that it turns into a situation of what we call brand hijacking, right? The example of how French cognac brands were hijacked by rap artists in the U.S., in New York City, to the extent that some of the names of the brands were used in some of the lyrics of the songs. The same was true with Cristal Champagne, Burberry brand, lots of other brands, big brands that have been quote-unquote hijacked. Well, a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, this is hijacking, this is not true to my brand. It's actually very positive. It means that consumers are passionate enough about your brand to help it evolve and to make it more relevant to what they're trying to achieve through their consumption and their communication. Again, consumers finding and promoting new uses and applications, in my mind, a very positive development if it's harnessed properly and managed properly. Consumers develop a new language around the brand, listening to the way your customers and consumers in general talk about the brand, the vocabulary that they invent to talk about the brand features and so on. That's when you know your brand is truly relevant. Brand users become brand champions, same idea, going from simply being a user to being passionate about the brand and championing it either through social media or whatever other form of communication. Extreme consumers, either for or against the brand, shout it out. And one thing that's not talked about enough is listening to extreme consumers. Obviously, we all like to listen to our extreme consumers when they have positive things to say, but often it's much more useful to listen to people who have a lot of negative things to say about the brand, okay, and to try to understand what it is that we're missing, why it is that we're not filling their needs. So listening to extreme consumers is also a good way to listen to sort of grasp this relevance. And finally, a community is born, obviously, a very strong marker of relevance. So the message is keep your ear to the ground, create great platforms. We talked yesterday about encouraging consumers to talk, whether it's through social media. Again, what I'm talking about here goes beyond social media, but creating great platforms for consumers to be able to talk and for those brand features to be able to continue circulating. It's the transmission and the diffusion that does the work of relevance. Offer lots of access points, obviously, provide clear communications, encourage transparent processes. Arm yourself with courage. That was something that was discussed yesterday, and I think the example from our friend at GM that shows, I said on Twitter last night, shows lots of guts. So arm yourself with courage. I think that's an important message there. And show plenty of respect and humility. If your customers are going to be doing the work for you of increasing the relevance of your brand, you need to show them lots of respect and to be humble about this process. Finally, because I'm an academic now, I have to sort of show a model. This may or may not talk to you, but it does kind of summarize a little bit what I'm talking about. So starting with the brand, and again, those brand representations, brand attributes that we talked about, leads to consumer-to-consumer communication and consumption. The consumers get information, status, belongingness. The previous speaker talked about this nice feeling that you get from being accepted as a friend on Facebook or being followed on Twitter. that is the value, that is the relevance. And